Unaware, the useless wife he kicked out inherited $10 billion from her late billionaire grandmother. She was standing in the rain, no umbrella, no coat, two bags sitting on the wet sidewalk next to her feet, and the door she had just been pushed out of, her own front door, was already closed and locked behind her. Clara Bennett stood there on the steps of the house she had cleaned, cooked in, decorated, and loved for 6 years. The rain came down hard. Her hair was soaked in seconds. Her eyes were wide open, not because of the rain, but because of the shock. The kind of shock that makes your whole body go numb. The kind that makes you wonder if this is a dream and you just need to wake up. But this was not a dream. Her husband, the man she had married 6 years ago, the man she had supported while he built his business, the man she had stayed up late waiting for every single night, had just told her to get out of his house. His exact words were, "You are useless, Clara. You have never brought anything to this marriage. You are dead weight. Get out." Just like that. No warning, no long talk, no counseling, no crying. He had said it so calmly, like he had been thinking about it for a long time. Like the words had been sitting in his mouth, ready, just waiting for the right moment to come out. Before we go further, drop your location in the comments right now. Where are you watching from? Let us know. And if you are new here, hit that subscribe button because this story is going to take you through emotions you were not ready for today. This channel brings you the most powerful stories every week. Don't miss a single one. Subscribe and turn on the notification button. Clara bent down slowly and picked up her two bags. One had some of her clothes. The other had a few personal things she had grabbed when he told her to pack. She had not even packed properly. She was so shocked that she had just grabbed whatever her hands touched. She walked down the steps and stood on the sidewalk, rain soaking through her shoes, her socks, her everything. Her phone had 32% battery. She opened it and stood there, not knowing who to call. Her mother was gone, passed 2 years ago. She had no siblings. Her friends had slowly disappeared over the years of marriage because her husband had not liked them. One by one, she had let them go to keep peace in the house. Now she was standing alone in the rain with 32% battery and nowhere to go. Her name was Clara Bennett, or at least that had been her name since she married him. Her real name, the one she was born with, was Clara Whitfield, and that name, the name she had quietly carried under her married name for 6 years, was about to change everything. But she did not know that yet. Let's go back just a little, not far, just 3 days before the rain. Her husband's name was Brandon Reeves. Brandon was tall, good-looking, and confident in the way that made people trust him before he even opened his mouth. He had started a real estate company 5 years ago, and the business had done well. Not huge, but comfortable. He drove a nice car. They lived in a nice house in a quiet neighborhood. From the outside, their life looked clean and easy. But inside that house, Clara had been slowly disappearing. Brandon had stopped seeing her a long time ago. Not overnight. It happened the way water disappears from a glass that you leave on a table. Slowly, a little less every day, until one morning you look at the glass and it is completely empty. He stopped asking how she was. He stopped coming home for dinner. He stopped saying good morning. He would walk into a room where Clara was sitting and look straight through her like she was furniture, like she was part of the wall. Clara had tried. God, she had tried. She cooked, she cleaned, she supported him when his business had a hard quarter. She never complained when he came home at midnight, smelling like he had been somewhere she didn't know about. She swallowed it all down. She told herself it was just a hard season, that it would get better. But it did not get better. What Clara did not know, and what she would find out later in the most painful way, was that for the past 8 months, Brandon had been spending time with a woman named Vanessa Holt. Vanessa was a marketing consultant who worked with Brandon's company. She was sharp, polished, and very open about wanting what she wanted. And what she wanted was Brandon. Brandon had told Vanessa things he had never told Clara. He had told Vanessa that his marriage was over, that Clara was a burden, that she had no ambition, that she had never contributed anything real to his life, that she was just there. And Vanessa had listened and nodded and made Brandon feel like he was right. So when Brandon came home that rainy Thursday evening and saw Clara sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a book, just sitting there quietly, the way she always did, something in him made a decision. He stood in the doorway. Clara looked up and smiled at him. He did not smile back. "Clara," he said, "we need to talk." She put her book down. She had heard those words before in her head, the words a husband says when something is wrong. She had imagined this conversation many times, but imagining it and living it are two completely different things. "Okay," she said softly. He sat across from her. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look sad. He looked like a man who had already made a decision and was now just completing the paperwork. "I want a divorce," he said. Clara felt the air leave the room. "Brandon." "Don't," he said. "Don't try to talk me out of it. I've thought about this for a long time. This isn't working. It hasn't been working for years. But we can talk about it. We can go to counseling. We can—" "No," he shook his head. "I don't want counseling. I don't want to talk. I've made up my mind." Clara's hands started to shake under the table. "Brandon, 6 years. 6 years of marriage. You can't just—" "6 years of what, Clara?" His voice rose just slightly, and that edge in it, that sharp edge, cut through the room. "6 years of you doing nothing? You don't work. You don't bring in money. You don't have a career. You don't have goals. I've been carrying this whole house by myself and you just exist here. That's all you do. You exist." The words hit her like slaps, one after the other. "I've supported you," she whispered. "I've been here. I've taken care of everything in this house so you could focus on your business. I was always here." "Being here is not enough," he said. "I need a partner, not a housewife who just waits for me to come home. I need someone who is going somewhere, someone with drive, someone who adds something." And then he stood up. "I want you out of this house," he said, "tonight." Clara stared at him. "Tonight? You have an hour to pack. I'll give you money for a hotel for a few nights. After that, we'll figure out the legal side." She could not believe what she was hearing. This was her home. She had hung those curtains. She had planted those flowers in the garden. She had painted that wall in the hallway the color Brandon said he liked. This was her life. "Brandon, please." "I'm not going to change my mind," he said, already walking away. "Pack your things." And that was how she ended up on the sidewalk in the rain. She stood there for a long time, long enough for the rain to slow down a little, long enough for a neighbor's dog to come up and sniff her bags and walk away, long enough for the streetlights to come on. Then she called the only number she could think of. It rang twice before a voice answered. "Hello?" "Margaret," Clara said. Her voice cracked. "It's Clara. I need help." Margaret Cole was Clara's old co-worker from years ago, before the marriage. They had stayed in contact but had not seen each other in almost 2 years. Clara had not realized until this moment how much she had missed her. There was a pause on the phone. "Clara? What's wrong? Where are you?" "I'm standing outside my house," Clara said. "My husband just put me out." Another pause. Then Margaret's voice came through strong and clear. "Give me 20 minutes. Don't move." Margaret arrived in 19 minutes. She took one look at Clara, soaking wet, 2 bags at her feet, eyes red, and didn't say a word. She just got out of the car, walked up to her, and hugged her. And Clara broke down, right there on the sidewalk. She cried the way you cry when you have been holding it for years and something finally opens the gate. Deep, ugly, shaking cries. The kind that make your chest hurt. Margaret held her and didn't let go. When Clara finally pulled back and wiped her face, Margaret picked up one of her bags without being asked. "Come on," she said. You're staying with me." That night in Margaret's small but warm guest room, Clara lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling. She thought about what Brandon had said. Useless. Dead weight. You just exist. The words played on repeat in her head. Was he right? Had she really added nothing? She thought about all the dinners she had cooked, the time she had stayed up to help him prepare for big meetings, printing documents, organizing his files, making sure his clothes were pressed. The time he had been sick for 2 weeks and she had taken care of him without sleeping properly. The time his business partner had left and she had sat with him for hours while he processed his anger. Was that nothing? Was all of that nothing? She pressed her hand against her mouth to stop the sound from coming out, and she made herself breathe. In, out. In, out. She didn't know what tomorrow would look like. She didn't know what next week would look like. She had no job, no income, and a marriage that had just been thrown out into the rain along with her. But she was alive. She was somewhere warm, and she still had 31% battery. She closed her eyes, and somewhere across the city, in an office she had never visited, a phone was ringing. It rang 3 times. Then a voicemail picked up. "You have reached the law office of Henderson and Park. Our hours are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. If this is an emergency, please press 1. If you are calling regarding the estate of Eleanor Whitfield, please press 2 and leave a detailed message. This matter is time-sensitive. Thank you." 3 days after the night Margaret brought her in from the rain, Clara was sitting at Margaret's kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a laptop, trying to update a resume she hadn't touched in 6 years. It was not going well. She had worked as an administrative assistant before she got married. She had been good at it, organized, fast, reliable. But 6 years was a long time, and the version of herself she was trying to put on paper felt like a stranger. She typed. She deleted. She typed again. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. She had been getting calls from Brandon's lawyer's office all week, and she was not ready for that conversation yet. But something, she couldn't explain what, made her pick up. "Hello? Good morning. May I speak with Clara Whitfield?" She paused. That name. She hadn't gone by that name in 6 years. This is Clara. Who is this?" "Miss Whitfield, my name is James Henderson. I'm an attorney at Henderson and Park Law. I've been trying to reach you for the past week. I'm calling regarding the estate of Eleanor Whitfield." Clara set down her coffee cup. Eleanor Whitfield, her grandmother. Clara had not spoken to her grandmother in almost 4 years. Eleanor was a complicated woman, sharp, private, and difficult in ways that made family relationships hard. When Clara had married Brandon, Eleanor had not come to the wedding. She had sent a card and a very strange note that said, "I hope you know what you are doing. I hope he is worthy of you." Clara had been hurt by that at the time. She had not called as much after that. The distance had grown. And then Margaret's mother had told her, through the grapevine, that Eleanor had gotten sick. And before Clara had worked up the courage to really call, not just a text, she got the news that Eleanor had passed. That was 5 weeks ago. She had cried quietly in the bathroom so Brandon wouldn't ask questions. She had not gone to the funeral because Brandon had said they had plans that weekend and she had, God help her, she had listened to him. She had missed her grandmother's funeral for a weekend plan that didn't even happen because Brandon canceled it last minute. That regret had been sitting in her chest like a stone ever since. "Miss Whitfield?" The attorney's voice came through again. "Yes, sorry, I'm here." She cleared her throat. What is this about?" "Miss Whitfield, your grandmother, Eleanor Whitfield, passed away 5 weeks ago. I imagine you are aware of this." "Yes," Clara said quietly. "In her will, she named you as her sole and primary beneficiary." A pause. "Miss Whitfield, I need to discuss this with you in person. Are you available to come into our office?" Clara blinked. "Sole beneficiary? I don't understand. My grandmother she didn't have much. She lived simply. A longer pause this time. Miss Whitfield, James Henderson said carefully, I think it might be best if we have this conversation in person. What I have to share with you is significant. She was at his office the next morning at 9 a.m. Henderson and Park was not the kind of law office she had expected. It was in a tall building downtown, the kind with marble floors and a lobby that echoed when you walked through it. She had worn the nicest things she had in her two bags, a navy blouse and dark pants, and she still felt underdressed. James Henderson met her at the door to his office himself. He was a man in his late 50s, silver-haired, with steady eyes and a calm handshake. He sat her down across from his desk and offered her water, which she took because her mouth was completely dry. Then he opened a folder. Miss Whitfield, I'm going to be direct with you because I believe you deserve directness. Please, she said. Your grandmother, Eleanor Whitfield, was not simply a private woman living simply. He looked at her. She was the founder and majority owner of Whitfield Holdings, a private investment company that has, over the past 40 years, grown into one of the most substantial private portfolios in the country. Real estate, tech investments, healthcare holdings, international funds. He paused. At the time of her death, the estimated total value of her estate was approximately $10 billion. Clara heard the words. She understood the words individually. $10 billion. But together, in that sentence, directed at her, sitting in this chair, they didn't make sense. She stared at him. I'm sorry, she said. Can you say that again? He said it again. $10 billion. And she named me as her sole beneficiary, Clara said slowly, like she was repeating it back to herself to see if it would start making sense. Yes, James Henderson said. There was one other potential beneficiary, a distant cousin on your grandmother's side. But your grandmother specifically, and in very detailed language, removed him from consideration and placed everything with you. She was very clear in her documentation. He opened another page in the folder. She also left you a letter, a personal one. She asked that it be given to you in this meeting after you were informed of the estate details. He slid a white envelope across the desk. Clara's name was written on it in handwriting she recognized immediately. Neat, slanted, slightly small. The handwriting of a woman who was precise about everything. Her hands were shaking as she picked it up. She didn't open it in the office. She thanked Mr. Henderson, listened as he explained the next steps, signed a few initial documents, and then walked out of the building into the bright morning air and sat on a bench outside for a long time with the envelope in her lap. Around her, the city moved. People walked past, cars honked, coffee shops had lines out the door. The world had absolutely no idea that Clara Bennett, or Clara Whitfield, had just been told she was worth $10 billion. She opened the envelope. The letter was 3 pages, handwritten, on cream paper. She read it slowly. Clara, if you are reading this, then I am gone. I hope you are not too sad. I lived a long and full life, and I made peace with God a long time ago. I know we were not close in these last years. That is a pain I carried. I want you to know that the distance was never because I did not love you. I loved you more than you ever knew. I kept myself away because I was watching. I have always been watching. I watched you marry that man, and I felt something in my chest that I could not name. I did not trust him. Not because of anything specific he did, but because of the way he looked at you. Like you were something he had gotten, rather than someone he had chosen. There is a difference, a big one. I did not come to your wedding because I did not want to smile for photographs at a marriage I was afraid would hurt you. I know that was selfish. I am sorry. I built everything I built by watching people carefully. I made a lot of money that way, knowing who to trust and knowing who to watch. And I watched you your whole life, Clara. I watched you give yourself away to people, to situations, to relationships, without ever asking for anything back. You have a generous spirit. That is beautiful. but it can be a wound if you let the wrong people use it. I do not know what your life looks like when you are reading this. I hope it is good. I hope that man has shown himself to be worthy. But if he has not, and if life has been unkind to you, I want you to know that what I am leaving you is not just money. It is freedom. It is the ability to wake up tomorrow and never have to shrink yourself for anyone ever again. Use it wisely. Use it for good. And please, for the love of everything, know your worth. All my love, always, Grandma Eleanor. Clara folded the letter very carefully and put it back in the envelope. And then she sat there on that bench for a very long time. She thought about Brandon's words. Useless. Dead weight. You just exist. She thought about Eleanor's words. Know your worth. She thought about how her grandmother had been watching all along, had cared all along, had been building something all along, and had quietly, without any announcement, decided that Clara was the one who should have it. A tear ran down her face, then another. But these tears were different from the ones she had cried in the rain on that sidewalk. Those tears had been about loss, about humiliation, about feeling like she was nothing. These tears were something else entirely. She couldn't name it yet, but it felt something like the beginning of something new. She did not tell anyone right away. Not Margaret, not the lawyer, not a single person. She went back to Margaret's house, ate a quiet dinner, watched a little TV, and went to bed. But she did not sleep. She lay in the dark and thought. $10 billion. She turned the number over in her head like a stone in her hand. She had grown up with very little. She had been careful with money her whole life. She had stretched grocery budgets and chosen the cheaper option so many times that it was automatic. She had once cried in a parking lot because she couldn't afford a car repair and didn't want to ask Brandon because he would say something about how she didn't contribute. $10 billion. She thought about her grandmother sitting somewhere, in some office, in some quiet room, building all of this, all these years, all this work, and never saying a word about it, just watching, just loving from a careful distance, in a language Clara hadn't understood while she was alive. I kept myself away because I was watching. She pressed her face into the pillow and breathed. The next morning she called Mr. Henderson's office and asked him to explain everything to her from the beginning. Slowly, no rush. And over the next 2 weeks, she learned the full picture of who Eleanor Whitfield had been. Eleanor had started small, a real estate purchase in her 30s, a second one a few years later. She had an eye for property that would grow in value, and an instinct for knowing when to hold and when to sell. Then she had invested in a small technology company in the 90s, a decision that most people around her thought was foolish. And that investment had multiplied beyond anything she had imagined. She had reinvested, then invested again, then spread into healthcare, into international funds, into a private holding company that owned pieces of dozens of businesses. She had done it all quietly. She never appeared in magazines. She never went to galas. She lived in a modest house, drove a modest car, and let the money grow in the silence she carefully protected. The only person she had ever said she was building it for was Clara. One of Eleanor's attorneys, a woman who had worked with her for 20 years, told Clara this directly. She talked about you often, the woman said. She said you were the only person in the family who had real kindness without being weak. She said you had a spine you just hadn't found yet. A pause. She said she was building this so you could find it. Clara found a good lawyer of her own, completely separate from the estate attorneys, to help her navigate both the inheritance and her divorce from Brandon. The divorce was already in motion. Brandon had filed quickly, which told Clara everything she needed to know about how long he had been planning this. What Brandon did not know, what he had absolutely no way of knowing when he filed those papers, was that the woman he had called useless and thrown out into the rain was now one of the wealthiest individuals in the state. Clara's lawyer made sure the financial details stayed quiet for now. There was no legal reason to announce anything yet. The estate transfer would take a few months to process. In the meantime, Clara was given access to a trust fund that Eleanor had set up, enough for Clara to get her feet under her without any panic. She found an apartment, a nice one, in a part of the city she had always liked but could never afford. She furnished it slowly and carefully, choosing things she actually liked rather than things that were just practical. She bought a good bed. She bought real curtains, not the ones from a discount store, but the kind that feel soft in your hands. She took long walks in the morning. She started cooking again, really cooking, with good ingredients, for herself because she wanted to. She started to feel the edges of herself coming back. She also started meeting with the team that ran Whitfield Holdings. They were expecting someone who had no idea what she was doing, and Clara could see that in the way they spoke to her. Slowly, carefully, explaining things as if she might not follow along. She followed along just fine. More than that, she started asking questions that surprised them. Sharp questions, practical questions. Questions that showed she understood cause and effect, risk and reward. She had spent 6 years managing a household, yes, but she had also spent 6 years reading everything she could get her hands on, because she had a lot of quiet hours and a mind that needed to stay busy. It turned out that all those quiet hours had not been wasted at all. By the end of her second week of meetings, the team's tone had shifted. They stopped explaining things slowly. They started bringing her real data. They started looking at her like she was someone to take seriously. Good. Meanwhile, Brandon had moved Vanessa into the house. This news reached Clara through a mutual acquaintance, someone who lived in their old neighborhood, and sent a cautious, apologetic text. "I'm so sorry to be the one to tell you this, Clara. I thought you should know." Clara read the text. She sat with it for a moment. She thought about how it would have felt to read those words a month ago, the knife of it, the humiliation, the spiral of questions she would have fallen into. Now she read it and felt something quieter. Not nothing. It still hurt. She was human and she had loved him, or at least she had loved who she thought he was. But it didn't break her. She typed back a simple thank you and put her phone down. Then she went back to the investment report she had been reading. It started with a real estate deal. Whitfield Holdings had been quietly watching a major commercial property development in the city for 2 years. It was a big, complicated deal. Multiple investors, multiple parties, a lot of money moving around. The company had been waiting for the right moment to make a move. Clara, after weeks of reviewing the details, made the decision to move. The deal was structured, the paperwork signed, and Whitfield Holdings officially stepped into the deal in a way that made their position very clear. When that happened, the business world noticed. Because when a $10 billion private holding company makes a move on a deal of that size, people pay attention. And when people started digging, the way business journalists and industry people always do, they found the name at the top of Whitfield Holdings. Clara Whitfield. Not a name many people knew, not yet, but someone found the connection, and someone published it. A business blog at first, a small one, the kind that breaks stories before the big outlets pick them up. Then a local business journal. Then a bigger outlet. Whitfield Holdings, led by new CEO Clara Whitfield, granddaughter of legendary private investor Eleanor Whitfield, makes major move on downtown development. And then someone with too much time and a very good memory for gossip, connected another dot. Clara Whitfield, formerly Clara Bennett, wife of local real estate developer Brandon Reeves, becomes one of the most significant players in the city's property market. And the story exploded. Brandon Reeves was in a lunch meeting when his phone started buzzing. He ignored the first few. Then his business partner leaned across the table with wide eyes and said, "Brandon, you need to look at your phone." He looked. 6 missed calls, 14 texts, and a news alert that made no sense to him when he first read it. He read it again. And then he read it one more time, very slowly, because his brain was refusing to process what his eyes were showing him. His ex-wife, the woman he had called useless, The woman he had put out in the rain with 2 bags and told to get out of his house. The woman he had said had never added anything to his life was worth $10 billion, was running a $10 billion company, was now one of the most powerful figures in the exact industry he worked in. He put his phone face down on the table. His hands were not steady. His business partner was staring at him. Is that the Clara you were married to?" Brandon didn't answer. Vanessa found out from a friend who sent her a link with the message. "Isn't this Brandon's ex?" She read the article. She read it twice. She set her phone down on the counter and looked at nothing for a very long time. She thought about all the things Brandon had said about Clara. Useless. No ambition. Dead weight. She's never done anything. She thought about how she had nodded along, how she had agreed, how she had even added her own comments. "She sounds like she was just coasting off you, Brandon." She thought about that, and she felt something uncomfortable settle in her stomach. Because Vanessa was smart enough to understand what this meant, and she was honest enough, at least with herself, in private, to recognize what they had both gotten wrong. Brandon tried to call Clara. He called once. No answer. He left a voicemail. He couldn't quite find the right words, so the voicemail was awkward and strange. Something about how he had seen the news and he just wanted to talk. He called again the next day. No answer. The day after that, he sent a text. "Clara, I think we need to talk. What's happened is incredible. I'm proud of you. Can we meet?" He read the message over before sending. He thought it sounded good, warm, reasonable. He hit send. 3 minutes later, he saw the 3 dots that meant she was typing a response. His heart jumped. The dots disappeared. No message came. Clara had typed a response, then she had deleted it. Not because she didn't have things to say. She had plenty of things to say. She had a full, complete list of things she could say to Brandon Reeves that would make her feel, temporarily, very satisfied. But she deleted the message because her grandmother's words came to her. Know your worth. Responding to Brandon, even with the most perfectly cutting words, would mean giving him her attention, her energy, a piece of her time, and he had already had enough of those things. She put her phone down and went back to her work. Brandon Reeves had a problem, several problems actually, but one of them was professional, and it was the one keeping him up at night. His real estate company, the one he had built over 5 years, had been trying to get into a major mixed-use development project in the downtown corridor. It was the kind of project that could elevate a small company into a serious player. He had been working on the deal for almost a year. He had presentations ready. He had a partner lined up. He had been so close. What he did not know, and what he found out in the most devastating way, was that the landowner of the key parcel in that development had recently sold it to a private holding company, Whitfield Holdings, Clara's company. He found this out when his would-be partner called him with a strained voice to say that the deal was effectively dead because the property had been acquired and the new owners had different plans for the space. Brandon sat in his car in his company parking lot for 45 minutes after that call. He wasn't stupid. He understood what was happening, or at least he thought he did. He thought Clara was doing this intentionally, that she was blocking him, that this was revenge. He called his lawyer. He asked if there was anything he could do. His lawyer said no. He called a friend in the industry to find out more about Whitfield Holdings. His friend called back an hour later with a tone of disbelief. "Brandon, Whitfield Holdings isn't blocking you out of spite," his friend said. "They're not thinking about you at all. They're a $10 billion company. You're not on their radar. They acquired that property as part of a much bigger play. You're not even a factor in their equation." Brandon ended the call. He was not on her radar. He had thrown her out in the rain, called her useless, replaced her with another woman, and she was out here running a $10 billion company, and she was not even thinking about him. He didn't know which was worse, being blocked on purpose or not being worth the thought at all. Vanessa moved out 3 months later. It didn't happen in a dramatic way. There was no big fight. It was more like the air slowly going out of something. She had watched Brandon become distracted and stressed and difficult to be around since the news about Clara broke. He was short-tempered. He was distracted. He would go quiet in the middle of conversations, and she knew exactly where his mind had gone. And she was honest enough, there was that honesty again, to admit that she did not want to spend her time trying to pull a man's thoughts away from his ex-wife. She packed her things one afternoon while he was at the office. She left a note that was short and not unkind. She said she wished him well. Brandon came home to an empty house. The house that had been Clara's, that Clara had decorated, that Clara had made a home. He stood in the middle of the living room and looked around. The curtains Clara had chosen were still there. The plant on the windowsill, Clara's plant, that she had somehow forgotten in the rush of being put out into the rain, was still there. Still alive. Someone had been watering it. Vanessa, probably, without mentioning it. He walked over to the plant. He touched one of its leaves. And something in his chest moved in a way he didn't know how to name. He reached out to her through her company. A formal email sent to the general inbox of Whitfield Holdings. He had thought about how to write it for 3 days. In the end, it was one paragraph. He said he was Brandon Reeves, that he understood she might not want to hear from him, and that he simply wanted to apologize in person if she was ever willing. He did not expect a response. He got one, 2 weeks later. 3 sentences, typed by an assistant. Ms. Whitfield has received your message. She is not available for a personal meeting at this time. She wishes you well. He read it 4 times. She wishes you well. Not anger, not coldness, not even the satisfaction of telling him to get lost. Just a quiet, clean, polite wish. It was, somehow, worse than anything else she could have said. A former colleague of Brandon's ran into Clara at an industry event 6 months after the divorce was finalized. The colleague, a man named Greg, who had known both of them from before, almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked different exactly. She looked like Clara. Same face, same eyes. But there was something in the way she stood, the way she moved through the room, steady and settled, like a person who had come to terms with exactly who they were. She was in conversation with 2 other people when Greg approached. She saw him and smiled genuinely. "Greg," she said, "it's good to see you." "Clara, I mean, Ms. Whitfield." "Clara is fine," she said. "How are you?" They talked for a few minutes. She asked about his work. She asked about his family. She listened when he answered. Really listened, the way she always had. And then Greg, unable to help himself, said, "I heard about you and Brandon. I just want you to know, and I know it's not my business, but I'm sorry for how it went. You deserve better." Clara looked at him for a moment, a small, quiet smile. "I did," she said simply, not bitterly, not sadly, just clearly. "I did deserve better, but I'm all right now." And Greg, walking away from that conversation later, thought about that for a long time. The way she had said it, no anger, no drama, no score to settle, just a woman who knew herself. He thought about Brandon at home in that house with the curtains Clara had chosen, and he felt something sad settle over him, not for Clara, but for Brandon, for everything Brandon had thrown away without even understanding what he had. Brandon Reeves had always been a man who believed he made good decisions. He had decided to start his own company, good decision. He had decided to take certain risks with properties, mostly good decisions. He had decided that his marriage was holding him back, decision made with certainty. But there is a particular kind of pain that comes when you realize that the decision you made with the most certainty was the most wrong. He started running into Clara's name everywhere. Business news, industry reports. She was on a panel at a major conference. She was part of a charitable foundation board. She was quoted in a piece about women reshaping the investment landscape. Every time the same description. Clara Whitfield, CEO of Whitfield Holdings. He kept a folder on his computer. He didn't know why. He didn't like that he was keeping it, but he would come across an article and save it, and then feel ashamed for saving it. He went to therapy. His therapist, a calm woman who let silences sit without filling them, asked him once what he thought he had really been afraid of when he was in his marriage. He thought about it for a long time. "I think," he said slowly, "I was afraid she was better than me, and I didn't want to admit it." His therapist let that sit. He let it sit too. "She was always reading," he said after a while, "always learning things. She'd make these observations about things I hadn't noticed, about people, about situations. And I'd think, why don't you do something with that? Why are you wasting it? But I think—" He stopped. "You think what?" his therapist asked. "I think I was more comfortable when she wasn't using it, when she was just in the house and quiet and not going anywhere. Because if she wasn't going anywhere, I didn't have to compete." He looked at the floor. "I called her useless because that's what I needed her to be, not because it was true." His therapist wrote nothing, just looked at him. "She was never useless," he said. "She was extraordinary, and I made her believe she wasn't, so that I could feel bigger." He pressed his mouth into a line. "And then I threw her out and told her to be grateful for the hotel money I was offering her." He gave a short, sharp sound that wasn't a laugh. "And she was worth $10 billion. Would it matter," his therapist said carefully, "if she wasn't?" He looked up. "If she had walked out with 2 bags and no inheritance waiting, if she was just Clara, who reads books and cooks well and listens like nobody else you've ever met, would it matter then?" He didn't answer, because the answer was heavy and he already knew it. In the 18 months after her divorce was finalized, Clara Whitfield restructured the investment arm of Whitfield Holdings. She brought in people who were sharp and honest. She cut loose relationships that were built on comfort rather than trust. She made decisions that sometimes made people in suits uncomfortable, and she sat with that discomfort without flinching. She donated a substantial sum to a women's economic independence organization, one that helped women who found themselves suddenly alone and without resources. She did this quietly, without a press release. She bought a house, not a huge, showy house, a real house in a neighborhood she loved, with a garden in the back where she planted things herself. She started seeing someone slowly, carefully, a man she had met at a conference who asked her good questions and listened to the answers. It was early, and she was not rushing it. She had learned, the hard way, the cost of rushing. She found a yoga class she liked. She got a dog, a mid-sized, enthusiastic brown dog who destroyed 2 pairs of shoes in the first week and whom she loved immediately and completely. She called the assistant who had sent Brandon's message back and told her the response had been exactly right. She visited her grandmother's grave on a Tuesday morning in early autumn, when the cemetery was quiet. She brought flowers, not formal ones, but the kind Eleanor had had in her house. Yellow ones, simple. She stood there for a while. "I found my spine," she said quietly. "I think you'd be pleased." The wind moved through the trees. A leaf came loose and floated down near her feet. She smiled. "Here is what nobody tells you about karma. People think karma is dramatic. They imagine it as a thunderbolt, something sudden and obvious. They imagine the bad person losing everything in one spectacular moment. They imagine the good person suddenly bathed in golden light. That's not how it works. What really happens is quieter and, in some ways, harder to watch." Brandon Reeves did not lose everything. He still had his company, though it grew smaller in his hands over time because his mind was never quite fully on it. He still had his house. He was not in poverty, not in ruin. But he went to bed every night in a house that reminded him of what he had thrown away. He built no real new relationship, not because women weren't interested, but because he couldn't stop comparing. And the comparison always went the same direction. He became, as years went on, a man known to be successful, but not happy. Comfortable, but not at peace. He had everything he had said he wanted: freedom, a partner who added things, a life without dead weight. And he found that what he had traded for it was the only person who had ever really seen him, the only person who had been genuinely in his corner, the only person who had stayed up at night worrying about him. He had looked at all of that and called it useless. And Clara Whitfield, who had stood in the rain with 2 bags and 32% battery, had taken those 2 bags and walked herself into a life that was so full and so hers that she genuinely did not have the time or the desire to be bitter. That's the thing about people who are truly winning. They're not looking back. Clara's lawyer once asked her, during a particularly long meeting about a complex deal, whether she ever thought about what might have happened if Brandon had not pushed her out. She thought about it honestly. "I think I would have stayed," she said. "I think I would have kept making myself small. I think I would have talked myself into thinking it was fine because that's what I was used to doing." She picked up her pen. "He didn't do me any favors in the way he did it. The way he did it was cruel and unnecessary. But the result of it," she tilted her head slightly, "sometimes the door you needed to walk through only opens when someone pushes you out of the wrong one." The lawyer smiled. "Your grandmother used to say something similar," she said. Clara looked up. She said, "Pressure makes diamonds. Pain makes wisdom. Loss makes space." She had it on a card on her desk. Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, real and full and warm. "Yeah," she said softly. "That sounds like her." On a Tuesday morning, 18 months after the rain-soaked night on the sidewalk, Clara Whitfield woke up at 6:30. She made coffee. The kitchen was bright. She had chosen the color for the walls herself, a warm cream color that caught the morning light just right. Her dog was already awake, sitting at her feet, tail moving hopefully. She took her coffee to the back garden. She sat in a chair she had picked out on a Saturday afternoon with Margaret, who had moved into a better apartment of her own and who came for dinner every Sunday. The garden was not perfect. Some of the plants she had put in had not made it. She had overwatered a few things and underwatered others. She was learning. She sipped her coffee. In 2 hours, she had a call with the Whitfield Holdings executive team about a new opportunity they were considering. After that, lunch with her lawyer to go over some final estate paperwork. In the evening, she was having dinner with the man from the conference. His name was Henry, and he made her laugh in a way that felt safe, which was the most important thing. Her dog pushed his nose against her knee. She reached down and scratched his ear. The morning was quiet and warm and entirely, completely hers. On a shelf inside the house, propped against the wall in her bedroom, was an envelope, cream-colored, her name on it in her grandmother's handwriting. She had read the letter many times since that first day on the bench. She would read it again, probably. Not because she needed to be reminded of its words. She had them close to her heart by now. But because reading it made her feel her grandmother nearby. Made her feel that careful, watching love. Know your worth. She knew it now. She knew it in the way that you can only know a thing after you've had it stripped away. After you've stood in the rain and counted your battery percentage and wondered if there was anyone left to call. After you've sat in a law office and been told that the woman who loved you quietly from a distance had been building you a future this whole time. She knew it in her hands and her chest and her feet on the ground. Clara Whitfield finished her coffee. She stood up, went inside, and started her day. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel tells stories about real human experiences, love, loss, regret, and the kind of comeback that nobody sees coming until it's already happened. Drop your location in the comments. Where are you watching from? And tell us, what part of Clara's story hit you the hardest? Was it the rain? The letter? The moment Brandon found out? Tell us in the comments below. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.